Welcome to ChiefPricingOfficer.com. Today's guest is Don Wilson, one of the pioneers of modern revenue management. Long before dynamic pricing became popularized, Don helped design the very first yield management systems at United Airlines. Those early models helped airlines decide something deceptively simple: how many seats to sell cheap and how many to hold for full fare. That decision ultimately reshaped airline economics. But what's remarkable about Don's career is what happened next. He didn't stop with airlines. He helped bring revenue management into entirely new industries: car rental, hotels, freight, truck rental, storage, casinos, and more, building some of the first decision support systems that turned pricing into systematic competitive advantage. Across those industries, his work has generated over $1 billion in incremental revenue. Today, Don advises companies at the intersection of pricing, revenue management, and, as you would have guessed, AI, helping organizations rethink how decisions get made when you have massive amounts of data and high-frequency transactions. For many of our listeners in the B2B pricing space, revenue management is a fascinating cousin discipline. It deals with the same core problem, how to capture value from limited capacity and uncertain demand, but it does so in environments with dramatically more transactions, richer data, and faster decision cycles. Which is exactly why revenue management is also one of the places where AI is likely to transform pricing the fastest. So today we're going to explore where revenue management came from, how it differs from traditional pricing, what B2B pricing leaders can learn from it, and where AI may take us next. Don is joining us today from Paris, France. Don, welcome to Chief Pricing Officer Podcast.
Thanks, John. Thanks for the intro. Very generous.
Great. And I'm looking forward to this. You have had such a rich history in the pricing space. Why don't we just dig in? And as mentioned in the introduction, there's the United Airlines story. And really, we've heard of yield management. Some of us have played in it, but very few know how it actually started. So can you take us back to that moment, the problem you're trying to solve, and what made the industry realize that pricing had to become more of a system rather than a decision?
Sure. Before deregulation of the airlines, prices were set, were fixed by the government, and it was usually on a per mile basis. This is long ago. After the deregulation, prices were up to the airlines, but the airlines didn't really know exactly what to do with it. They had a lot of data, but they didn't have a systematic approach to setting their prices. One of the driving factors in this was the introduction of low-cost airlines, Frontier Airlines, People Express, some of the others were the original low-cost carriers that entered the market. And the traditional airlines recognized they had to compete with this low cost, but they didn't want they couldn't change their whole pricing structure and their whole cost structure to compete with these low cost entrants. So for them, the decision was simply, how many seats on each airplane do we sell at a super saver rate, a lower cost, and how much do we save, reserve for full fare people that want to come on? That was the original problem. It was two fares, just each leg, and that was the original problem that we had to solve, was the forecasting and optimization of the potential demand in order to fill up the airplane and maximize the total revenues.
So you said a couple of things there to unpack. Post deregulation, the forcing function you saw was was the low cost airlines, and then the larger carriers saying, "Wait a minute, we have to look like the low-cost airlines in order to keep people on the plane? That was the forcing function?
That was a big part of it. Yes, because the low cost airlines were coming in, they were cutting into the traffic and the margins that the airlines had. They recognized they had to compete. They couldn't compete on the cost basis. They had big bloated structures. These new companies were coming in, smaller planes, shorter legs. They were taking just that specific segment of the business. But what if, and American, United, the other big airlines, what if they could introduce the Super Saver fares to compete at that level? But now they needed to know, okay, well, how many seats do we allocate to the Super Saver fares, and how much do we keep for full fares? That was the original problem. And American Airlines decided to do it in house, and United Airlines brought us in, outside contractor to develop the systems to support that.
Wow. So how did you get into it? How did you become this outside contractor? Was it I suspect that this industry or this specialty didn't exist.
It did not exist. We were a Silicon Valley think tank. We had a good reputation in very large scale systems. We had a world oil model. We had done a lot of research for DOE, EPRI, CIA, and some others. So we had a good reputation, and we were contacted by the senior vice president that was driving this initiative in United, and convinced him that we could do it.
Wow. And so was United convinced that this was the right thing to do, or did you have to take the extra step of putting together the model and then convincing them that the model was actually worthwhile in pursuing?
No, they paid for the development.
Okay.
So the lead on that, the lead was very convinced. The whole executive team was not convinced. So it did take some quite a bit of work with the executive team to bring them over to the wisdom. And mostly you do that by just showing the incremental revenue improvement.
And on paper, it made sense, but getting somebody to commit probably took a little bit more cajoling. Is that about right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the next question we have, because much of our audience is in the B2B space and haven't had that much experience, maybe flew on planes and understand how that model works, but haven't been actually involved in doing the work, doing the price improvement work. So when you think of revenue management environments like airlines or hotels versus B2B pricing, did you have a particular experience that was a hybrid of the two or could contrast those two?
Well, we've done a couple of projects that I would consider much closer to the traditional uh, B2B pricing. For example, we had brought this technology from the airlines to rental car to the hotels and to freight and logistics. In the freight and logistics, that is actually much closer in a way to a traditional B2B pricing model. The goal there was to analyze and develop the pricing strategy for each individual customer. So we did that, for example, for Sealand, for Bax Global, as an integrated framework of activity-based costing, so we could see what was it really costing us for that particular customer. A network optimization model, take all of the assets of planes and trains and trucks and ships and the intermodal transport, and a customer profitability engine, And then we could evaluate, okay, for this customer using our network, using our assets in this way, what is the real profitability of that particular customer? And then that will determine the pricing structure. We took a slightly different cut on that with UPS Airlines, with UPS, sorry. UPS, great company, very data driven. They know their numbers. Everything is driven by the data. And there was a fairly simple, well, fairly direct question was, okay, we compete with FedEx. How can we uh, set our prices versus FedEx in order to take the best customers in each market and win enough business to fill the pipeline? So there it was simply, okay, for that particular customer, what is our competitive strength look like? And then we can optimize the prices across that uh, demand curve and optimize the prices and maximize the revenue and the contribution to profit.
Wow. So that was done on major customer by major customer basis, specific to the customer. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Which also meant that uh, there was a decision point of when they were using UPS versus when they were using FedEx. Where was that decision point?
Oh, the contracts came up frequently. And for UPS, their target for their sales team was to go into go into big customers that are FedEx customers and steal them. So it was a very aggressive acquisition approach. So they would
Ah,
try to get the companies to reevaluate, relet the contracts.
I see. So that was an approach where you were the ammunition and the field sales people took the shot, but was very
Yes,
specific on who exactly they were shooting at in order to gain market share. Is that right?
yes, but and also every opportunity that came in, we would run through the same evaluation process.
Um, wow, that's very interesting and insightful because in a B2B space, uh, setting prices and actually taking the additional step to be customer specific, or if you will, portfolio specific, is something that I see some industries moving into, not fast enough, but an opportunity that you were doing decades ago. Do I have that right too?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And then we
Uh,
would also take whole segments of the market, that we couldn't define individually and say, okay, well, what should be the pricing strategy for this particular segment? So that might be industry. It was generally industry by geography. So for the Southwest, we had a different strategy versus the Northeast, depending on the relative strength of UPS in that particular market, or for backs, depending on the trucks and trains and planes that they had available within their network. So you're constantly evaluating the trade-off between the network assets and how they're being utilized versus the customer portfolio that you have.
if it's okay with you, I can't confirm or deny serving backs in my past. However, I've always heard that backs was positioning themselves as we will take anything, anywhere, including live elephants, and we'll take it on the back of a napkin in terms of contracting. They claimed that they were the most flexible a couple of decades ago. Was that true at that time when you were working with them, and did you help them through that brand promise?
I never heard the napkin contract part of that, but they would take on anything. Their positioning in the market was We are the heavyweight overnight freight experts. If it's heavyweight, high dim, and you need it overnight or expedited, we're the ones, and we'll make it happen. So they took on that, but at that time, um, their largest customer was Harley Davidson merchandise and accessories. So that was not really their target market, and so it was saddlebags and parts and accessories shipped all over the country.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and
They
one
go
of
ahead.
the one of the suspicions of some of the senior staff was, okay, they're our largest customer, and there was some other large customers as well that, but are they profitable? Do they make us any money? Does this make sense for us to be devoting so much of our resources to serving this customer? And nobody could answer that. So that was the one of the driving urgencies that they wanted us to solve. They had just had a big study by one of the big consulting companies, and that said, "Hey, you should figure this out." Okay, how do we do that? Okay, so we bring in these guys. They'll figure it out.
So we've got the brand promise, but are we actually making money at it?
Yeah, that was my focus. I don't know about the. I'm still in touch with the the guy who ran that group. I will ask him about that.
Um, yes, I always saw them as a fun and unique organization. So why don't we move on?
Sure.
Um, the next area really we love to tell stories of triumph, and clearly over your career you've had a variety of triumphs and insights. But some of the greatest learnings we have is, well, through failure. And if you could do me a favor, I love your story about Hertz. Could you explain what happens at Hertz and how you learned from that experience?
Sure. So we're on the back of the success at United Airlines. Had a very high level introduction to Hertz. They said, absolutely, we want to do this. We went in, applied the same basic yield management, revenue management principles and systems, and did the preliminary implementation for the one pilot site we were working with. Everything was great, and it failed terribly, in fact. And but now in hindsight seems kind of obvious, but the big difference for rental cars is that the turn cost compared to the rental price is very high. It costs a lot to check in the car, inspect it, clean it, do any minor repairs, adjustments, and get it back on the lot. So that whole cost is pretty significant. So it makes a big difference to the profitability of the company if you're doing 3 one-day rentals versus 1 3-day rental. So the length of rent is a critical control. Uh, that contribution to profitability and the length of rent, much more important than just the price, just the rate that you're renting it at. So we made that adjustment and worked fantastic. In fact, the facility we're working with was the big rental at Chicago Airport, Chicago O'Hare Airport at ORD. So you've probably been to that Hertz rental. It's right next door to Avis, which is their biggest competitor. And if you go in the back, where all the crazy is happening, right? They're inspecting, they're washing, they're staging, they're getting the cars back out a lot to rent. It's just separated by a chain link fence. You can look over at Avis, you can see the Hertz. So we had the system running for a few weeks and it was running very, very well. We had shifted the rentals there much more toward longer length of rent. So we were getting 3, 4, 5 day rentals. That was a busy week, business week rental center. And we were leaving the shorter rentals to the competition. So the board was pretty skeptical that they would show them the numbers on paper. We said, hey, let's go out to the facility. So we walk out on a Wednesday and we go in, walk in the back. The back there's a few cars. They're being prepped, they're being cleaned, they're being put out. And you look over at Avis and it's complete chaos. Hundreds of cars stacked up, everyone running around screaming, just complete chaos. After that, the board said, okay, how much would you like? It just They just opened the checkbook and said, whatever you need, just do more of that.
And so, in order to make that differentiation and turn over the short-term rental to your competition, were you turning the dial on pricing, and pricing was then driven by length of rent? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we had explicitly different price controls for length of rent. So for every day of rental, for the each date into the future, and for every length of rent, we had a price for that particular category of car. So that's what it's quite a bit more complicated problem from what we were solving for the airlines, but fundamentally the same underlying structure. We just had a more complicated product that we're selling. For the airlines, we're simply selling a seat at two different fares on a leg. We had lots of flights across the country. It was a pretty simple problem. This was just a little bit more complicated product that we're selling, but same principle associated with it. Same underlying forecasting optimization engine that we were applying to it.
That sounds fascinating because on the surface, you look at an airplane and it is close to 1 million parts to create a 737. Automobile, not so much. It's down in the thousands. And so on its surface, you would think that airline seats would be more complicated. But in fact, you're telling us that it's exactly the opposite.
Well, so it's capital cost versus operating expense. So that's what we're dealing in the space that the capex has already been spent. There's not much we can do about it. We can use our revenue management systems to inform where they should be investing in new assets. Sure. But we're just okay, you've got this plane, it's really just you've got this number of seats in coach and in first class and business class. And we want to maximize the revenue and the net profit contribution of those seats. So that's the product in an essence. And same for the cars. The cars, that money's already been spent, but now we still have to, every time we do a rental, we have to do the checkout, check in, inspection, clean, and get it back on the lot. So that incremental cost is a lot more than just the cleaners coming onto the plane and just wiping things down and crossing the seatbelts.
Right. That
So
is
if you
really
think of it like
fascinating.
that, then you go, yeah, that is a different problem.
That is a very different problem. And being able to understand what is being optimized is really the challenge in many of the pricing things that I'm seeing now, making it very topical and very relevant, especially with those organizations that are selling capital equipment but are now trying to sell AI software over the top of it. You're asking a CapEx versus OpEx type of question, and being able to understand both of those worlds simultaneously, and where OpEx is being used up, and being able to apply that to a price is a huge challenge. It's very topical for today.
Sure. And if you think about it, there's a pricing component even in the revenue management, right? You have to have a set of prices so that when you get down at the end of the year, you've made enough money so that the company is profitable. But the revenue management problem is much more narrowly focused. We're just, okay, we've got we've got this set of assets. We have to dynamically set the prices in order to maximize the revenue for that product, for that leg, for that car, for whatever we're dealing with.
Right, right. Wow. It takes quite a mind to be able to understand how all those pieces play together. It's fascinating. Um, let's move on.
Sure.
Now, this is an interesting segue from where we just were, because we were just talking about a lot of math. But is math the hardest thing to go solve? I know that many in B2B say the model and optimizing the model is where they want to focus because it fascinates them. But is it the hardest part?
Well, interesting. It depends a little bit on the maturity of the industry. So as I've worked and I've gone into new industries where all of this is quite different. You're really shaking things up. You're shaking up how people think about pricing, and it impacts everybody from the executives to the planning group that's doing it, all the way out to the point of sale and even the people like that are running the front desk or doing the sales opportunities. So it really depends if there's, if they come from an industry and they've had the experience with this, then it tends to go more smoothly. But for the early implementations, especially, we do a lot more change management work. So active change management work. Um, one of the just a couple when we started working with the hotels, Omni Hotels was a big initial proponent. The owner was a oil wildcatter, and he was a data guy. The CFO was a data guy, and they really were very enthusiastic about it, but also recognized it was going to be a big upheaval. So we slowed down a little bit, and we developed a mission for what we were doing, and then had it printed and framed and put on every executive's desk throughout the entire company. And then they had a weekly internal newsletter that I took over and became the editor and renamed it for 12 weeks during the implementation process. And so I edited and published the charm. I don't remember. It was revenue management at the end. I don't remember exact um, acronym for it, but we renamed it the Charm newsletter, and simply every week talked about the pricing and revenue management, not any of the technical details, but what it was going to mean for how the hotels were sold and how it was going to support the hospitality and the customer centric services that's what you expect from Omni Hotels. So that was very, very positive.
So There is a phrase out there that 20% of the effort that you put into it is going to be creating the system or the model for pricing, and the other 80% has to do with changing minds and changing minds at a number of different levels. It sounds like that's what you were going through as you were moving into hotels.
We did that quite a bit. Um, and almost every new industry that we went in, uh, we first time that we did anything associated with truck rental was for Ryder TRS. Ryder at that time was usually smaller rental facilities were run by a mom and pop team, a husband and wife, often lived on site. And so a very unsophisticated audience. And their idea of forecasting was looking outside and seeing if they had any of that truck. So I mean, literally, they would get a call. I need a 20-footer for Saturday. We don't have any, even though likely that they would be getting in returns on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning. So we had a lot of work to do in helping them with some of the fundamentals of thinking about how the forecasting was going to work and how that was going to help them and what that might mean, even before talking about the pricing. One of the things we did was we put together a Vegas style game that we ran at the national convention. So we had a table, we had a deck of cards, we had a big wheel that you would spin. The wheel would tell you what trucks were coming in. So you're expecting one truck, you might get one truck, you might get one truck that was damaged, you might get none, you might get two that come in, you might get a completely different truck than what you were thinking about. And we just taught hundreds and hundreds of the dealers from around the country just how to think of how do you maximize the revenue given what you have. You've got these trucks, you've got this uncertainty, you've got this demand coming at you. Do you accept this truck rental or not? And then there it makes a big difference. Is it a local truck rental? So you're going to get the truck back probably in so many days, or is it a one way? So that also added some rigor to the pricing for one ways, which in the past was completely capricious. It was just made up. But we could say, okay, here's how markets are moving across the country. Here's the relocation costs, because if you get, all the trucks wind up in Southern California, eventually you're going to have to relocate them. So there's a cost to it.
So it sounds like you're a man ahead of your time. I'm hearing gamification in order to teach.
Well, that was something we came up with. It was a lot of fun. It really was. But um, just to do something different. I mean, how many conferences have you been to and people kind of go around, they get a business card. That wasn't going to work. That wasn't going to help move the needle at all on this. But if you have a big crowd around a Vegas and you're spinning a wheel, there's a lot of people are interested.
Well,
We could only play with one person at a time, but there was a lot of people that could watch and learn and get something out of it.
well, that is fascinating and a lot of fun. Great job. Well, let's move on now to a the question that everybody asks. And we've been through now your history. We understand a lot of the data heavy, transaction high work that you've been doing. When we introduce AI into that equation, How is AI working with you right now, and where do you see it going?
Well, okay. Traditionally, we've used AI and machine learning now for a couple of decades. It's been pretty well ingrained in helping forecasting systems. We use it some in the optimization. We use it some in the data intake, in trying to sort out dirty or mismatched or incomplete data. So uh, we've used that quite a bit, um, or we have had some uses of AI in the past, but really now it has accelerated greatly. So you have AI helping with the coding. You have AI helping with new enhancements. You have some of this large scale AI opening up new types of analysis that we could never approach before. Just they have the ability now to look at large, un, more unstructured data sources and make sense of it than we ever had the ability to do before. So we're looking and doing active research into using other types of data sources that may or may not pan out. So the in hotels, the a lot of hoteliers would tell you, oh, we should set the pricing by the weather. Well, you know it's kind of hard to when you have a 90-day or 120-day transient booking window. It's a little bit hard to predict. Okay, what's the weather going to be on day 110? But there's lots of other signals that we could use from social media, from macroeconomics, from other sources that we're starting to incorporate into the forecasting and also somewhat into the optimization engine as well. And then for the system itself, I think this is where there's going to be where there are and will be even more great strides in this. If you think about the difference between a traditional user interface and what now we have available through AI, the it's going to be a big revamp and rethinking of the user experience. So you no longer have to just prepare and the tables and graphs and charts and dashboards and all this. They can be put together much more dynamically by the user, by simple plain language questions. So that's an area that I think is very interesting. So that it's giving the user a much richer sense, and then it can be much more of an interactive experience. So the user can say, "Well, I've been thinking about this particular segment. Can we look at how we might change the pricing or controls strategy for this particular segment?" And they can have much more of an interactive experience. Still, a lot of the same numbers underneath, but that kind of interaction of why and what's really going on and what's behind this. So we're trying to build in some of the best expert revenue managers that we know, trying to build in their expertise into the system and capture that, so that becomes the base part of the system.
So, does that mean that those expert revenue managers are necessarily going away? Or do you see this AI wave that we're currently in, or at least in the near term, to be something where um, it's greater and richer and more insightful, making more business for all of us to do.
I think it's kind of supercharging their capabilities. So they're, a lot of the revenue management that we do has always been done by somebody in the hotel, or just pick on a hotel for example. Somebody had to set the room rate. Somebody had to say, do we have a minimum length of stay, or do we have any length of stay controls at all? Someone had to say, here's how we're pricing the transient guests versus the group request that we get. Someone had to do that. All we have done with the revenue management is provide the forecasting and optimization to take large amounts of data and do that automatically, do it repeatedly, and do it a little bit better, maybe a lot better. So what is this? What we're doing now is saying, okay, this is just the next evolution for the revenue managers, and saying, okay, now you're freed up from a good part of what you would stand up and talk about in the daily revenue meeting, or the day, whatever daily hotel team meeting that you might have. Now, what else do you want to think about? What other directions do you want to go? What else could we do with the information that we have available? So it's I don't think it's decreasing the need in any sense, but it is helping them in the job that they already have, which is to take a huge mass of data and results and communicate it to the rest of the team in a way that makes sense. And also then allowing them more freedom to explore other avenues of ways that they could make money. So you didn't really have the ability in the past to look at, okay, well, let's look at ancillary revenues all across the property, and let's look at ways that we could maximize the revenues there. Let's look at the ways that we could uh, better target business that is going to spend more incremental money at the hotel besides the room rate. So that's just different avenues that the revenue managers can explore.
That's interesting. So, if you were to characterize it, or let me try this another way. If I were to characterize what you just said, this is really about increasing the opportunity set for what's being looked at and improving the quality of what's being presented, and liberating those revenue managers to go look at things that they otherwise would have liked to, but just don't have the capacity at the moment to go do.
Yeah, maybe they didn't have the bandwidth, or maybe there was nothing available to them to help do that type of analysis. So now are they all the way back to doing it in a spreadsheet, or is it something that we could support going forward?
Sounds like there's lots of opportunity for everybody going forward. That is an uplifting message.
Yeah, I think so. And then from the revenue management system side, AI has a lot of advantages too. Makes some of the um, modifications and the support less expensive. Makes some of the uh, new data intake and data processing less expensive. Makes the user support costs more efficient, less expensive. So I think we're also going to be able to see some incremental uh, improvement in the cost to the users. So that should be good news all around. Of course, as the capabilities expand and like that, there'll be a balance, right? So car manufacturing got much better, but you don't see the car prices coming down because the content goes up. So it's the same type of problem.
Okay, good. Uh, Now, a closing question for you. As you take a look in the rearview mirror and across all of your industries, airlines, hotels, freight, casinos, um, what do the best pricing organizations or leaders understand that most companies are still missing?
I mean, my first instinct is that you have to innovate or die. But I'm not sure that's really the best of answer. But as we have seen, uh, the early adopters of dynamic pricing, revenue management, the early adopters in the industry have seen a huge competitive advantage and a huge revenue gain over years, sometimes decades. So it has been a huge advantage for early adopters. Is there some cost to it? Yes, of course. So the first systems, revenue management implementations in any industry are also the most expensive, right? As we figure things out, as we make mistakes and learn from it and grow, and as we get the connections and the systems all worked out, but the advantage is huge, um, and it can be operational. So United Airlines, pretty early on, attributed more than $100 million per year in incremental revenue from their yield management system. Uh, the Hertz board was so impressed and so overwhelmed by the incremental revenue improvement that they purposefully hid it. I don't say they lied about it, but they purposely hid it from the market because they did not want Avis and their other competitors to adopt it. And they wanted to maintain the competitive advantage. Um, Self-storage facility or company that we worked with, the owner attributed $100 million in the sale price of his company to the IT plans that we had developed for central reservation, property management, and revenue management systems. So it can have a big dramatic impact on the operating revenues, on your competitive positioning, and on the valuation of the company.
Wow. And all of that seems to come back to this notion of pricing discipline, which I, I see on a day to day basis. If you're not measuring how you're performing, if you're not being intentional about what it is you expect, then it's very difficult to try to gather that information to know what it is you're going to be doing next.
Yes, you have to have the discipline. Well, especially for dynamic pricing revenue management systems. I always say the one of the dirty little secrets of our industry is that it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be directionally correct. And then the system is going to reforecast and reoptimize based on all the information that it just gathered in that window, whether it's a couple hours or the next day, and do a complete reforecast and reoptimization. So as long as they're directionally correct, we're going to course correct as we go along, so that as we come to the departure of the flight, to the day of arrival for the um, for the hotel, for whatever it is, as we come into that final day when this asset that we're trying to optimize, when it disappears, when it goes away, then we come in and just fill up the property, just fill up the plane, and maximize the total revenues.
So it's fascinating when you're talking about discipline and you're talking about being directionally correct, because taking action is far better than waiting and waiting and thinking that somehow you're going to generate or get some great insights. Don, in the thousands of systems implementations that you've done in pricing, what is the predominant method for implementation? Is it enterprise-wide, or is it pilot-based where you're proving value and then you're scaling value?
It's the latter. You always have one or two or three or four pilots that you do to launch the system, to prove that it works, to prove that there are people can use the system, that you get the results, and then you implement system wide.
Don, is there anything else that our audience would benefit from hearing from you? Is there any advice to those who are looking to elevate their game? And what should they be taking on as they think about leadership in the pricing space?
The best is you have to get broad exposure. Anybody who's doing the pricing and revenue management, maybe you came from a technical background, maybe you came from an accounting background, maybe you came from the services background, but you're going to need a very broad perspective. You have to understand the point of sale. You have to understand the customer segments. You have to understand the difference that we have in pricing for groups versus transient, for large customers versus small customers. You're going to have to learn the language of the executive team, because you're going to be communicating upward. You're going to have to convince them that sometimes that you're right and they're wrong. You're going to have to know the numbers, really know the numbers, really know the numbers. And my experience, the best people in pricing and revenue management, they really know their numbers. They know the numbers of the hotel better than anybody else in the property. You're going to have to understand the other parts of the business and how that may impact what you do and how what you do may impact them. So it's the pricing and revenue management really sits at the center of a lot of the conversations in a hotel and in a number of the other organizations as well. So you have to understand sales, marketing, the point of sale, IT, the executives, quite a broad range of skills.
So to be successful in price leadership, you have to be multilingual, jack of all trades, master of numbers, and always be innovating.
I would
Is that right?
say that's good. That was pretty good. That's a pretty
Okay.
good synopsis.
Yeah, the way you described it was in a level of detail that says if it's B2B, if it's revenue management, anything that involves and sits at the nexus of the way the business operates, if you're showing the capability of understanding all of it, speaking to all of it, and the details of what actually matters to people who are getting paid, it seems like you've got a bright future ahead of you.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
It's much more than the system than the numbers. It's also the communication where all this fits in. You can't, you can't come up with some, oh, we're going to do this new segmentation or this new pricing strategy if it just doesn't work in the market. It just doesn't work with the IT systems that you have. It doesn't work with the sales processes that you have. So there, you can really screw up things very badly if you kind of ignore the realities of how things are going to be received in the marketplace and or how it can be implemented by your extended team all the way out to the person that is doing the direct interaction with the customer.
One more question that I have that seems to, at least in the B2B side, I find to be ignored all too often, and that has to do with compensation. In the revenue management side, does that resonate with you as well?
Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. And actually the best revenue management systems will help with that, will help to inform the metrics that you want to drive. So if the revenue manager knows that they're going to have some part of their bonus structure dependent on some of these KPIs or these metrics that they can drive within the system, and then the system is going to inform their bonuses. They're going to use that system more, and they're going to drive that system to produce those results. Hyatt Hotels was particularly good at that. They incented their revenue management team. They built in the feedback within the technology within the system, and they saw a measurable improvement, not just in their own numbers, but relative to the competitive set. So they were driving some big advances, and exactly for that particular point. That's a very good point.
Well, Don, thank you so much for spending the time with me. And thank you from the chiefpricingofficer.com community. We appreciate all of the stories that you've told, and congratulations on such a successful career. We'll look forward to be in contact with you here in the near future.
I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.